Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. We begin our video with a story in which our OP's ex-wife didn't want to let him go and made his life a living hell. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. What goes around? For years, my husband's ex tortured us. The constant game playing, suing us endlessly and needlessly, etc. She was a millionaire and we lived on my paltry $50K a year salary as my husband's entire paycheck went to her household. That changed once we got a better lawyer. In one lawsuit she won against us, we literally had to sell our belongings, piano, race bikes, and take out $10K and a credit card to pay it off. Again, things got better once we got a better lawyer. The thing that burned her most, though, is that no matter what she did or how she tried to manipulate us, our happiness was a thorn in her side. Finally, the children were grown and we no longer had to interact with her. Hallelujah! Until the wedding of my husband's daughter. A quick note, her personality encompasses manipulation, extreme narcissism, and a borderline personality disorder. She was given to possessiveness, and it was always her money, her kids, despite my husband being an excellent father, her and hers, it never ended. So the wedding day arrives. All the moms and grandmas get corsages, but not me. She informs me my presence will not be needed for pictures, although her new husband of 1 year will be in them, and everyone relevant is seated in the front row except for me, who gets seated in the second row, coincidentally behind her new husband. I take it all in stride, I'm there for my stepdaughter's day, and I'm not going to be the one causing any scenes. I'm just trying to keep my husband from getting too upset by the bullcrap. But I do have a plan forming in the back of my mind. The wedding starts and the usher seats the groom's mom. When it's the ex's turn to be escorted to her seat and gets halfway up the aisle with her big toothy smile, she loves it when the spotlight's on her, I make sure to wait until she's looking directly at me, then I lean forward and wrap both of my arms around her new husband, pick my mouth right up against his neck, and whisper some nonsense about it's so great to finally meet him. By the time she turns the corner to take her seat, her face is beet red and smoke is coming from her ears. She sat stiff as a board during the whole ceremony with me right behind her. Bonus points to my husband, who didn't take his assigned seat next to her and came and sat next to me in the second row. She looked pretty miserable for the rest of the night and kept shooting me death glances, which fazed me not in the slightest. During one of them, I blew her a kiss, and I thought the top of her head would blow off and a little man would pop out and run away screaming. I slept really great that night. Ah, the little things. Your husband had to give his entire paycheck to a millionaire? Who was your last lawyer, Michael Cohen? And our second story. The man we call subsection 6. This happened a long time ago, somewhere around 2012 to 2013. Had a good friend who I smoked cigars with, and he had a friend named Jim. I didn't see Jim very often because we lived in different cities, but every time I visited, we would smoke cigars in the park. Well, near the park. Jim was probably about the smartest guy that I've ever met, and if I bet Einstein, it might be eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Well, almost. We called him subsection 6 because he was always finding loopholes for absolutely everything. He's the kind of guy that would read all the tax laws and interpretation bulletins and mold his life to that. He was one of the first people that was working from home. He had his printer in a different room than where he had his office so that he could claim more square footage as the home office. He was that kind of guy. And he wasn't an accountant or anything. He was an IT guy. He just read lots. One day, the three of us went down to the beach to smoke cigars. In parks, you're not allowed to smoke, but we grabbed our chairs and went anyway. The tide was low, so we went down just past the rocks where the sand started and smoked away. That's where I heard this story. So remember, Einstein told a story about if he had 1 hour to solve a problem to save his life, he would think of the proper question for 58 minutes. Well, Jim's one of those kind of guys that ask questions that we don't think about. He looked around the park, because it was busted one time, and asked himself this question. I can see the property line where the road is. I can see the property line where there's a house next door, and he can see the property line where there was a hotel next. But where is the property line when you're looking out at the ocean? He did his homework and he found out that while the city owned the foreshore, it was DFO that owns the ocean from the high tide line down. This is Crown land, and they don't have a prohibition for smoking on the ocean. That's where we had our chairs the day he told me the story. So he lives in a retirement city with lots of old ladies who have their morning walks the same time he had his morning cigar. That's how he got busted in the first place, but he was ready after he did his research. He used that printer that was in another room and printed out the laws. He also made a phone call to one of his cigar buddies who was a lawyer, who knew a lawyer that did property stuff. I'm not talking about real estate transactions when you buy a house. I'm talking about property rights, air rights, things like that. A lot higher up on the food chain. Top floor, corner office kind of guy. So depending on cigar, you're looking at 45 minutes to smoke a Robusto to an hour and a half for a Churchill or anything bigger than that. Soon thereafter, the Karens came by complaining about him smoking in the park, even though he was in the ocean. This was even years before anyone was called Karen. So the Karens started bugging him and threatened to call the police or bylaw, and he told them to go ahead. He just started his cigar, so he had plenty of time. He sent a message to his lawyer friend of a friend to give him a heads up he might be calling later. No problem. Well, the Karens didn't just call bylaw, they called the police. So Jim continued smoking a cigar while he handed over the printout regarding foreshore ownership. It's not fault of the police because they're used to speeding and stuff like that, but they didn't know this law. Bylaw comes by and pretty much the same, so he gets on his phone, shows them the lawyer's website, and makes the call. Meanwhile, the cops and bylaw are phoning their supervisors about this as well. Of course, the Karens are not happy, so they start complaining about the secondhand smoke, but they don't have any legal basis. Jim talks to the property rights lawyer on speakerphone, and he says for the police and bylaw supervisors to give him a shout, and he'll enlighten them about where park property begins and ends. And of course, the best part of the story is that we were smoking a 10-year-old Punch Churchill when he told me the story. So the epilogue is that whenever he's smoking at low tide and bylaw comes by, not just for him, but for dogs and drinking and other stuff like that, they always shake their head and wave. They told him they've had complaints about him smoking in the park, and they now ask, where is the guy, in the park or down on the sand? Because the sand isn't park, it's the ocean. So I just wanted to do a quick edit for a bunch of reasons. As far as the printer and taxes go, I don't know the whole story. What I do know is that he was subsection 6, and not only did he discover the law that said below high tide was not the park, but also read a lot of the interpretation bulletins from the tax authority. He wouldn't commit any tax fraud. He would use the rules to the full extent. Unfortunately, I can't confirm what happened. I do know at this point he hasn't been audited. Sometimes in your life, you meet someone and you just go, wow. Jim was that guy. There's a lot of things he didn't have in life, like a wife and kids, but he lived his life like a how-to textbook. Everything was well thought out and structured. He was gregarious and kind and giving. That's all I'm going to say. Second edit. So it appears there are two flashpoints in the story, and I'd like to address both of those. As far as taxes go, and I mentioned it before, not only did Jim read the interpretive bulletins, but knowing his thoroughness, he would have confirmed this. I don't know the whole story, but I do know we called him subsection 6 for a reason. I know I just mentioned it above in my first edit, but there are still Americans saying this is tax fraud, and I'm sorry, but I'm not American even though I live in North America. People around the world have different tax laws than you. As far as secondhand smoke, anyone who lives on an ocean can tell you low tide can be a large area. We didn't get a GPS to figure out where the high tide line was and smoke right on the edge, thumbing our noses to the people walking by on the path. We were far away from people because whether you're legally correct or not, there's always going to be people yapping, and why wreck a nice peaceful cigar by having people bother you? Now, if I'm on an inland lake and I'm standing in the water just below full bowl, that's a lot closer to the park. I've never actually done this on a lake because you have physical proximity. I don't like the smell of cigarettes, but if someone walks by my house smoking a cigarette and I'm in the front yard, I have no legal recourse. That's just the way it is. Would a person walking by on the road smoking a cigarette be a jerk? Not specifically. I just move away even though it's my property. So one more little fact before I close edit number 2. Jim lived in an apartment condo, and smoking on his balcony, although legal, did cause complaints. In the wintertime, he smoked in his truck. Yes, Febreze works, I've tried it myself. and in the summer went to the park. In each situation, he was further away from people than if he was smoking on his balcony in the summertime. And our next story. Pro Wedding Revenge. I'm a photographer and was working with a super sweet couple. Everything was normal up until the cocktail hour. My partner and I were setting stuff up for the reception, and the groom comes up to us and asks the DJ if he can play a video for his wife. We assume it's some cute slideshow or something. Toasts happen and the video starts to play. Turns out the bride was sleeping with the best man and the video was from a pie. The whole room went silent. Bride runs out, best man goes to follow her, groom's father punches best man out. Everyone also ended up staying and having a great party. Super nice people. I ended up shooting the groom's second wedding. I asked him why he went through with it. Apparently they had a prenup. If at the time of divorce, adultery could be proven, the offending party owed the other $15,000. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.